On Earth, you see all types of land. And right now, there are around 200 countries covering these pieces of lands. In this video, we want to look at the most strategic countries in the world. By strategic, we mean a place of importance. Just the way the country is located, it makes it strategic, and it all has to do with its geography. A lot of experts and geography experts believe that the most strategic country in the world is the United States, a giant piece of land that's between two giant oceans, and if anybody were to try to conquer it, they're gonna have a terrible time. Not only is the continental USA 48 states that cover this area, but it has two strategic states as well, Alaska and Hawaii, which we've made a video on. The US is a type of country that if it doesn't allow itself to get conquered and no food enters the country, they're not gonna starve. The most farmland is found in the US. Most of this farmland is next to this giant river, the Mississippi River. The most amount of farmland in a country next to one river belongs to the Mississippi River. It's more than 38 kilometers long, and one of the reasons that there's plenty of food if anything were to happen is because of this river and all the little rivers that flow into it. The most important thing that makes the US the most strategic country is that it's extremely far away from other superpowers. In World War I and World War II, just by being far, made the Americans the real winners. It saw the least amount of damage, and that alone will make a country a superpower, something that you will not find in Europe and Asia, because enemies were always borders of each other. In North or South America, you don't have any other countries that could compete with the US. It seems like there are some people in work that prevent this from happening, like it will never allow Mexico to be a powerful country. Why does the power of a country like this have to be in cartel hands? Mexico is a very rich nation that has a lot of things, but it's not near an important country in the world, and it's mainly because of the drug cartels that don't make this area stable whatsoever. Some experts say that these cartels are controlled by the CIA, but other experts don't believe that. But let's continue. Let's look at another strategic country. Since we don't know which one is first and second, we're just gonna go in alphabetical order. So we're gonna start with Iceland. Iceland is a very strategic island in the North Atlantic Ocean. It's in the center of the North Atlantic, and it's basically the stopping place in the middle, and it's watching out for both sides. Even though the name of the country is Iceland, but it's not that icy, and that's because they have a heater coming from the Gulf of Mexico called the Gulf Stream, and we've made a video on it before. And that is the exact reason Iceland doesn't have weather like Greenland. Even though it's extremely cold, you can farm there. It has volcanoes, and there's so much marine life around this island that if everybody were to fish, they would never be hungry. That's how plentiful it is. One of the reasons that Vikings were extremely large human beings was all that protein available to them, especially the seafood. So it's an extremely small island, but very strategic. The next strategic country, India, a country that is now the most populous country in the whole world, more than 1.4 billion people. When you look at the history of India, you will see that throughout its history, it has always been a very populous area. There's plenty of food and water. You can farm there easily. The weather was good, and people would come from different parts of the world to live here. And that is why you will find more than 120 different languages in India. But they always had a universal language that back in the day it used to be Farsi, but now it's English after the English took over. When India was in British hands, it was the most important area that they had control over, and India was the reason that the British Empire became the most powerful and the richest empire in the whole world. This giant peninsula is like a dagger in the Indian Ocean, and it basically has control over the entire Indian Ocean. Let's go to the next strategic country, Iran. Did you know that if Iran wouldn't help, the Allies wouldn't have won World War II? The Allies knew this, and that is why they easily came into Iran and took over, so they could guarantee the win, and it's a very long story. Another extremely important that's in Iran's control is the Strait of Hormuz, where more than 20% of the world's oil has to pass by here. And since it's very shallow water, the ships have to go into the Iran parts of the water to pass by, in case they don't want to sink. There is another nickname for Iran that has been around for a couple centuries, and they refer to it as the bridge between two continents. Because if you want to access Africa or Europe, you have to pass by Iran, unless you want to go a much bigger route. The next strategic country is New Zealand, a very far away land. This small island is actually ginormous, but most of it is underwater. And if you've seen our video that what is going on under New Zealand, you will be familiar with it. In the end, the island is going to get bigger and bigger, and there's going to be a new continent. This part doesn't have anything to do with New Zealand being a strategic play, but a lot of experts believe that New Zealand is much more strategic than Australia itself, and that is why back in the day, the British did not want to give this piece of land up. If Australia is under attack, it's going to be very hard for that attacker to take over New Zealand as well, because it's located about 1,300 kilometers from Australia, and it's pretty lone out there, and it would be a huge risk to attack a land like this all the way out here. It's kind of like New Zealand could be a giant army base for the southern part of the Pacific Ocean, and it's all because of this that New Zealand is considered a strategic country. In terms of the alphabet, let's go to the next country, Switzerland. Why does Switzerland exist anyways? It's sandwiched between 4 countries that is a part of all 4 of them. We have made a complete video about the history of Switzerland if you would like to see it, but the reason Switzerland was created in the first place is that it was a very strategic place back in the day, and they knew this. A very mountainous area, and no army has the guts to enter it. The only army that actually took over Switzerland in history was Napoleon's army. The Nazis didn't even enter Switzerland. It is true that they didn't take any sides, but they were just not willing to enter it. Iran also didn't take sides, but the Allies entered from both sides. You could consider Switzerland a natural border because around it there's huge mountains. Since the Holy Roman Empire, they knew that this area could be a special place and be a faraway place from the rest of the Holy Roman Empire. The next country, Turkey. This country is in a very special place as well because it's the bridge between Asia and Europe. Just having the Strait of Bosphorus allows Turkey's strategic points to go up because the most important navy ships that is in Russia's hands is in the Black Sea, and if it wants to enter the oceans, it has to go through this strait. One of the reasons that Turkey was added to NATO was because of having control over this strait. NATO basically said if you want to take over this strait, you're gonna have to verse all of NATO. Istanbul is also considered the most strategic city in the world because half of it is in Asia and the other half is in Europe. In all of history, Anatolia was a very important place in the world, and they were always fighting over it. The next country is Britain. Britain or England or the UK has always been a part of Europe, but it was always separated as well because of that tiny part of the sea. And just being separated caused them to be more successful than the other countries. Like for example, the Germans would enter France and conquer them much easier, but it was very difficult to enter England. Another reason that Britain is important is because of the north part, and if Russia wants to enter the Atlantic Ocean, it has to pass by England from the north side. Just because of the same reason, Norway is also very important. Norway basically is the most important country in Scandinavia because it literally hugs the north part of it, and it's even bordered with Russia. There's plenty of oil in the Norwegian Sea and North Sea, and most of it is in Norwegian hand. And that is why it's an extremely wealthy nation compared to other Scandinavian nations. Another interesting fact is that Norway has the second biggest coastline in the world. In first place, we have Canada, which is ginormous at 240,000 kilometers of coastline. Norway's in second place and it's about 100,000 kilometers. And the reason it's that much is because they count every little crack. They go inside and out, and that adds a lot to it because it's not a flat piece of land. If a flat piece were 2 kilometers, but because it goes back and forth like a zigzag, it makes it like 20 kilometers. But besides this, let's get to know some other strategic countries, like for example Italy, a boot-shaped country that's in the heart of the Mediterranean Sea. Throughout history, this boot was extremely important, and that is why when you enter the city of Rome, you see 2,000 years worth of buildings that were built 2,000 years ago or yesterday. You can't name any other city that has history like this. So Italy has always been a great place for a civilization because the Alps mountains is like a wall protecting the Italy peninsula, and that is the reason that Italy remained safe throughout history and everybody had a hard time attacking Rome. Another strategic country is Afghanistan. You already know that 3 superpowers tried to take over Afghanistan, but they weren't successful because there was a war and they had to leave because it was a failure for them. You could compare the strategic place of Afghanistan like Switzerland, where it's a very mountainous area and you really can't enter it and take control. So it is a place, if the people get along with one another, there is hope that it could be a very stable nation. The last strategic country we're going to talk about is China. You might say you didn't talk about China, one of the most powerful countries in the world. In terms of geography, China could do better, but the most important thing that makes China a very strategic place is because of the population and their language. And of course, they have a very long history. Of course, the most important section of China is the east coast where the main cities are located at. This section you see is Tibet, a place that's not that useful and airplanes don't even want to fly over it. Throughout history, China never really wanted to take over this place, except during the Qing dynasty, but right now it's part of China now. Some even consider Tibet the harshest place in the world because of this. Of course, one of the most important things that makes this country strategic is the language Mandarin. More than 1.4 billion people speak Mandarin, which is the #1 language in the world. Like for example, the English language that is taught almost everywhere in school, about 1,350,000,000 people speak it around the world, and it does not beat Mandarin yet. Just these 2 facts alone will make it hard for any enemy to take over China. So their #1 thing that makes them strategic is their language and population, not their geography. But of course their geography is not bad. but the other two are stronger.